All right, good afternoon. I'd like to start off by thanking Gloria Remijo for asking me to speak at this LEN conference today. I appreciate that. Gloria from over at Riverside High School and Maritza Perez Lowenberg, the librarian at the Isleta ISD. So I appreciate that, being asked to be here today. And of course, being in El Paso, Texas, and on the border, my name is Lawrence Welsh. And I'm going to be talking about resiliency through poetry, a writer's journey. And I'd like to start off by saying that I'm not from El Paso, but I've been on the border for 26 years. But I first discovered El Paso when I was traveling across the country, actually hitchhiking across the country in 1989, and I came into West Texas. Spent some time here, not knowing anyone, and then eventually getting down to Houston and working as a waiter down in Houston, Texas, and some time in San Antonio. And when I finally got back to Los Angeles, where I was from and living, I knew one day I wanted to come to the Southwest and live here. And so I've been here 26 years. So, resiliency through poetry, a writer's journey. A little background, I was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles. This is really important to my journey. In a Irish American household. My mother was an Irish immigrant from Ireland, and my father was Irish American. Was an Irish American bus driver from Colorado. It's important because my story is the story of an immigrant son. My mom left Ireland because there was nothing there after World War II. She could write. She was very literate. She never went to high school. She grew up on a small farm, and there was just no opportunities. So she went to England and then immigrated to America, legally immigrated to New York City, and then, would work as a nanny there. Had some jobs there. She did war work in London in World War II during the Blitz. And then she had a relative sponsor, and she went out to Colorado. And that is where she met my father. And they married and moved to Los Angeles in 1954. So we were in this neighborhood called South Central. And I was born there in 1959. And my father was a bus driver, and he was a bus driver for 40 years. And every day when he would come home, he would drop a stack of newspapers on the floor in the living room, or it was kind of the den in this small home we had. And as a kid, from the time I was a little boy, I would go over to that stack every day and read, okay, and read those newspapers once I learned to read. And my father taught me to read young. And in that stack every day would be, because he would pick them up from customers that would leave them on his bus. They would ride the bus and then get off and leave the newspapers. So at the end of the day, he would gather up the left newspapers and bring them home. And in that stack would be things like the Los Angeles Times, the Los Angeles Herald Examiner, the South Bay Daily Breeze, where one day I would end up working as a newspaper reporter. That's in the future. The Los Angeles Herald Examiner, the Pasadena Star, the Santa Monica Evening Outlook, the San Pedro News Pilot, the Long Beach Press Telegram. And so they'd be stacked there, and I'd go through them and read and read and read. A lot of times about sports, uh, the front pages. I would read politics. And then I'd read about music because I was very into music. So reading was extremely important to me, and I got to like it. And there were some books in our house, but not a lot. But there were some. Uh, my father always got Time magazine, so I would read that. So we grew up in a reading household. My parents always read the Reader's Digest. This is going way back. And so I mention all of this because this is all real important to my journey as a writer and as a poet. I went to Catholic school, and so this was back in the time, and I wasn't the best student. But I was taught by nuns and lay people, and I was an altar boy. So I grew up in this Irish American Catholic household, um, where we learned things like, in addition to reading and digging into the news and uh, reading books, I had to learn how to fight. And so that was part of my journey too. My father was a football player. He played football, he played basketball. My father was a boxer. He was kind of a man's man, and there came a time in the neighborhood where he had to teach me to fight because it was rough. It was tough down there, and I was getting picked on, and there was the gang wars were starting. This was in the by the time 1969, we went through the Watts riots. I saw, Robert Kennedy's death, John F. Kennedy's death, the Watts riots. We weren't that far from Watts. And then, I had to learn how to fight. And so I did. My dad taught me how to box. And because I needed to at school, there's a lot of race hatred. There came a time soon where um, there were only a couple of white families left in the neighborhood. And I ran around the streets with a bunch of Chicano dudes, and we had to learn to fight. So fight I did to defend myself and to become some sort of badass in South Central Los Angeles. So that's it. I could lie about it and say that those things didn't happen, but they did happen. A lot of terror, a lot of fear, a lot of screaming on the streets. And we'd go out, there's a white boy, let's kill him. And so the neighborhood changed, Everyone left, but we never left. And it was all right. We had to fight. I fought. And I read, and I listened to music, and I listened to the blues. And I taught myself how to play harmonica, and I listened to rock. I had an older sister and an older brother. God love them, who are still alive. Everyone's still in Los Angeles but me, or in California. I left 26 years ago and never went back. Um, so I went through 12 years of Catholic school. I started playing music in bands. Started playing in blues bands. I was a blues harmonica player. And then there came a time when I guess I was 19 or 20 that I started writing my own songs, and this comes into the whole poetry journal journey. I'd start writing songs for a punk band that I was about to form in Los Angeles, and I taught myself to play guitar, and I'd start writing songs, and I'd write them fast. Um, Chronicling what I saw around me, chronicling street life, all sorts of things I saw in Los Angeles. So I formed this band, and I had a punk band in Los Angeles, and you know, I started working at 19 as a supermarket clerk because I moved out of my home and I had to make my own way, and I always had to make my own way. No one was going to give me any money because my parents were working class. So as a man, I got out. I started working as a supermarket clerk. Lived in some dump apartment. I was writing songs. I was reading nonstop, and I didn't go to college because it wasn't for me then. Uh, So I formed this punk band called the Alcoholics, and we started gigging all over Los Angeles. And it was during that time, a couple years into that, and giving my life to music and writing and being in the band, that I hurt my back on a graveyard stock crew at Safeway. And my Irish mother told me, "What are you going to do now? You can't do manual labor anymore." I'd busted out my back. And so I was 22 and I thought to myself, wow, I don't have a lot of options because I'm not educated very much. And then the light bulb went on. Maybe I'll try college. Maybe I'll try college. And so I started at a community college called El Camino. And at that time, I was dating a young woman who had already had her degree uh, from Loyola Marymount University. And she told me, if I'm going to date you, I need to be dating an educated man and somebody who's going to have a degree someday. So, not because of her, but she helped my path. I got into college and I really got into it. And I saw it as a way out of manual labor jobs. I saw it as maybe having a decent life someday. So I was 22, 23, looking for a major, and I took a journalism class. Changed my life. I thought, wow, I could maybe get a degree in journalism. I could make a living somehow as a writer, working with words at all times. I had a great teacher at the community college. Her name was Jolene Combs. God rest her soul. She's gone now. And she saw something in me and she reached out to me. And so I started working as a reporter on the school newspaper, and loved it and struggled, but I did it and won some journalism awards. And she liked me and she reached out to me. These are the old days where we were still doing it on a typewriter. But I started really getting into literature and English and writing. And, that was one of the first times where I started spending a lot of time in the library. I had in high school, but I really spent a lot of time at the community college library. Sometimes writing papers, sometimes working on homework, and then digging into books. It was around that time. Um, and this was kind of towards the end of not the end, but once I got into college, the punk band thing started kind of dissipate because it was rough. I mean, it was a rough scene. And we never, a lot of deals were promised to us, never happened. We did record stuff. It's out there nowadays. We played, with a lot of the old school LA punk bands. But, I found my way into college and I liked it. I liked it. I thought my professors were a trip. I'd never met anyone like that in the ghetto in South Central. So, I started paying attention. And it was around that time that my girlfriend, and I started dabbling into poetry, but she brought me home the selected poems of Paul Verlaine, the French poet. And I really dug him. And Tom Verlaine of this new wave band Television had taken his name. This New York City band called Television had taken his name from Verlaine. And so I dug Television, and she gave me this book of Paul Verlaine's selected poems, the French poet, and I dug it. And later on I'd get into all the French poets or the big ones like Baudelaire and Mallarmé and Villon and Tom Verlaine, Paul Verlaine, and on and on. There's one right here, another one. I forget some of them now, but anyway, I was digging in hard. And so what poetry did for me was sometimes at night before bed, I wouldn't want to tackle a novel that night or a short story, but I always thought, wow, even when I'm tired, I could read a poem and it would help. So I started digging into poetry. And like with music, one poet leads to another. So in the 80s, sometimes I started getting into jazz music, listening to it. I was always into the blues. And so one jazz album led to another, to another, to another, to another, to another, until over the years I had 1,000 jazz records and knew a lot about the main players in the jazz movement. I still listen to a lot of jazz. I still listen to a lot of music. But it's the same with poetry, you know. And then at that time, I kind of tried my hand at writing some poetry, but it wasn't very good. Or I don't know. I don't want to analyze it. You know, I do some, but I got on the school newspaper. I'm working as a journalist. It's all about words, you know, it's all about the language. It's always about digging in. And then, uh, you know, I started working for school newspapers and really loving that and reading a lot of poetry and reading fiction. You know, getting into the beats. Later on, I got real hip to the Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg and a lot of the beat writers and all writers from all sorts of sense, reading a lot of poetry. And then I got junior year, I started working as a newspaper reporter for the Pulitzer Prize winning Daily Breeze newspaper in Southern California. So I got a job there as an intern first as a cub reporter. And that was a trip because I was covering stories all over the South Bay of Los Angeles, places like Inglewood and Hawthorne and Lawndale, Hermosa Beach, Manhattan Beach. I had a part time beat the Palos Verdes Peninsula. And so that really opened the world to me. And I'd stay there for just about 5 years as a reporter. After I graduated with a couple of bachelor degrees from Cal State Long Beach, you know, I, I went to work as a reporter. And it's all about language, you know, all about editing, all about writing, all about, you know, trying to keep things tight in journalism. And so at that time too, you know, I'm writing, you know, I'm starting to do some of my own writing. But you know, and I started around that time, I don't know, 26, 27. I started hanging out with other writers and poets in LA. There's a guy there by the name of Michael C. Ford. He's an avant-garde poet. And he used to run around with the Doors, of the band The Doors. And he knew kind of all the key players on the avant-garde poetry scene in LA. And I used to take him to dinner because he was hurting for cash. And, you know, I'd start going to readings in LA and start listening to the local voices and found some people I was very, very fond of their work and doing my thing. Um, you know, there was a time that transition when I got out of college and I was working as a reporter. I wasn't making much money. A time of transition, a time of frustration, where you know, that's where I did some traveling across the country. I worked as a waiter. I quit my journalism job. But, you know, I was writing, trying to write, you know, writing fiction, published a short story in a magazine in San Francisco. I'm 28 years old or so. Not really too into poetry, but somewhere around, you know, 29, 30 years old, um, I'd be working on fiction, I'd be working on essays, and I wrote this poem called Velvet. And I got very involved in small press magazines in America, in the literary scene in America. And I wrote a poem called Velvet, and I dug it. And I looked at it, and I'd done so much reading. And I was like, this is kind of cool. And I sent it to a magazine in Indiana called Zen Tattoo, and they published it. So pretty much since then, you know, for the past 35 years, I've written every day. I've read every day deeply into poetry, fiction, essays, where I have, you know, thousands of books. Deeply into all different schools, street poets, jazz poets, outlaw poets, mainstream poets, the Black Mountain School poets, Charles Olson, Robert Creeley, William Carlos Williams, a lot of women poets, a lot of Chicano poets. I became friends with Ray Gonzalez, who grew up here. Huge influence on me, and we did a book together a few years ago. Jimmy Santiago Baca from the Black Mesa in Albuquerque, very important to me, very important. Wanda Coleman, the Watts poet, won a big influence on me. People like Sandberg and Wallace Stevens, and then I got real deep, and I'm still real deep into the Irish. The great Irish writers, the great Irish poets. I'm lucky. I've been to Ireland 4 times. A couple of years ago, I did a writer residency in Cork, Ireland. So really into the Irish and writing about the Irish American experience for me. What does it mean to be an Irishman or an Irish American or a Yank or whatever you want to call me? But, I grew up with this heavy Irishness, and in Ireland, post Middle Ages, in Ireland, the poets were higher than the kings. And then they kicked them out on their asses. They kicked the Irish poets and said, "You're not needed. You're like vermin." They kicked them out on the streets. But they still have this place, the Irish writer, the Irish poet. It's very big to me. It's, I've dug in heavily to Irish writers, but to everyone else, to everyone else. And I still dig in. And so along the way, I think in the years of writing, I've developed some sort of voice that, critics can dig or not dig. I don't know. I mean, later on today, somebody wants to see a 13th book of poetry of mine. I published 12, and I'm going to send it out, and then I'm going to let it go, because I've had acceptance and I've faced a lot of rejection. When writers ask me about it, I have no illusion to where I am. But I have 1,300 rejection slips in my back room for novels, for books of poetry, for essays, a lot of rejection I've taken. And then along the way, I don't know, I've had about 400 people say yes to me. So, I feel blessed. I've managed to land my work in about 300 national and regional magazines. I've got 12 books of poetry out. I had a big defeat last year with a press who kicked me to the curb on a novel, well-known press, and they wanted it, and then the pandemic hit and they went broke. And so, it's part of the writer's life, the ups, the downs. Am I where I wanted to be, for supposedly this age? Not really, but I got to be happy because I'm doing it. I'm hitting it almost like a fighter in the ring, fighting, boxing. And so it's everything. I read every day, I write every day. I read every day, I write every day. When I go out in the desert in El Paso, always have pen and paper with me because I find that poems are dictated to me. From where? Spirit realm? I don't know. God? Possibly. Can I quantify it? No. But it's been a blessing. So I pray, I meditate, I hike, I write. And I take my lumps, where I'm going to take them. Won awards, not won awards. But the main thing is, along the way, over the years, libraries have been so important to me, so important in that journey. I used to, when I went to Cal State Long Beach, sometimes I would drive to UCLA. I'd bury myself for hours in libraries. The library at UTEP, very important to me. Great collection. Some people used to complain about the UTEP library, and I was like, the UTEP library is wild. There is a lot of great books in there. It always surprises me. The downtown El Paso library, fantastic. I've gone there for years. El Paso Community College, where I work as a professor. Yeah, there's surprises there. So librarians, very important to me right now. If anyone's interested, I've come close. I'm trying to sell my archive. I've saved 15,000 letters. I've got everything saved, all the correspondence for about 35 years. And I've had some interest in Boston College, liked it, almost bought it. Someday I hope it goes somewhere. Recently, I just completed 100 pages of letters with Gerald Nicosia, the great national bestseller who wrote uh, the best book ever about Jack Kerouac, A Memory Babe. And for some reason, he took a shine to me, and I feel blessed. I've got 100 pages of letters from him. And so we write back and forth, and I've written to these people throughout the years. So letter writing is very important. You know, save your letters. I hope someday they'll be preserved. But if not, what counts is that it's been done. It's been done. So what a great journey it's been. And in my hope for my students, because I've taught at UTEP and I've taught at the community college for a lot of years, is that anyone who has an interest in this, and I love talking to my students at the community college, and I've had great students over the years, that they find their way. Just like I'm still trying to find my way at my age. I'm still doing it. That they dig in. I tell them, you know what? Pay attention, because that's what I learned in journalism school. Pay attention. I've had sometimes critics over the years say, well, what gives you the right to write about the border or about Chicano culture, or about whatever? I said, it's my life. I ran the streets in South Central with Chicano dudes. I mean, and I grew up in LA, so it's the Los Angeles, it's the city of the angels. So I'll write about whatever I want. I was taught in journalism school, pay attention to wherever you are. So I tell my students, even though you may have challenges with it, pay attention to El Paso. I still do. I'm always paying attention. Whether I'm in Segundo Barrio walking by myself, whether I'm in downtown paying attention to the murals, whether I'm on Paseo de las Luces, the Pass of the Lights, whether I'm up against the Juarez line, whether I'm in Napra, wherever I am, whether Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, I'm paying attention, and then I write, and so I tell my students, that's my story. You write your story, because I know, Paso from my students, they've got rich stories. I've read them over the years. Fantastic essays, culture, language, history, the Spanish language, which is so deep, which I love. And I'm not the best at, but I can have some fun with it still, and I'm not going to beat myself up like I used to, that, your Spanish isn't good enough. I know what I need to do to get it good enough, I listen, I practice, I read the great Spanish poets. I'll read Neruda. I'll read Lorca. I'll read a lot more, and I dig in. So, that's the hope. Is that my students find something. They find something in the library. They pull a book that inspires them and then hit it, And you don't worry about anything else. You worry about becoming you, because I'm still trying to become me, I'm still trying to become me. I've got 5 or 6 books ready to go in manuscript form. Whether they'll find a home before I die, I hope so. If they don't, I'm going to still hustle it out there, because I'm still, I'm shooting my shot. I got to shoot my shot. I got to be me. I'm not looking to be anyone else. I'm not looking to be Ray Gonzalez. I'm not looking to be Jimmy Santiago Baca. I love those dudes. I love their work. John Recchi, I'm not looking to be Cormac McCarthy. I'm looking to be Lawrence Patrick Welsh, truly as much as I can. And then, whatever happens, happens. So that's what I want. That's what I want, on that journey. So I have a list of 100 poets that I give my students. Um, and I have one of the most joyous experiences of a student that I taught years ago at the community college, went on to get his master's degree, now works at the community college, and he's become a poet. And I taught him English 1301, and he's taken it from there. I had another student that I taught that went to Hanks. She came back and saw me, and she got her doctorate degree from Columbia in New York City and came back to see me. I said, to her, grew up in a single family household, young Chicana, and got her doctorate degree from Columbia in New York. And I said, keep going, keep going. Because that's what my Irish immigrant mother told me. Keep going, Lawrence, keep going. You're going to have to fight. You know that from the time you're a kid. You're going to have to get your ass kicked. You're going to have to box. You're going to have to get up when you get knocked down. You're going to get knocked down again and again. You're going to get up. And you're going to read. And you're going to write. You're going to send out there. And so poetry and writing in this whole world, it's not always been easy, but it's where it's helped me form a resiliency through the tough times, and I've had tough times. To keep going. I got a wife, I got a couple teenagers. My daughter's just home from UT Austin. She's got a couple more semesters to go to graduate. My son's at El Paso High. My wife went to El Paso High. I'm the Angeleno, the native of Los Angeles, who has been proud to be in El Paso for 26 years. Because this is a place where, I've been able to write about those experiences. So it's given me everything, the words, the language from those early days, My mother and father are gone now. My father died when I was 24, the bus driver. Peter F. Welsh, he was a good man. He taught me to read. He had his issues like any parent does. My mom's been gone since 2017. Not a day goes by that I don't think of those folks and I don't pray for them. And we sometimes had some tough years, and I remember them for what they gave me, the gift of language, the gift of striving, the gift of fighting, the gift of resiliency, the gift of saying no matter what happens or what people call you or how people kick your ass, you will go and you'll have to keep going. Because like what my mom told me when I was a kid, she pulled me aside when I was fighting on the streets. And she said, you think you have it tough here. This is nothing compared to Ireland. This is nothing compared to the Great Potato Famine, where 1 out of every 3 Irish men and women were buried in unmarked graves. And they didn't even have a potato to eat. So you get your ass out there and you realize what America has to offer. So I salute them, and I salute the librarians, all who have pulled books for me. Loyola Marymount University, where I used to go and hang out at that library. Cal State Long Beach. The downtown Los Angeles Library. Heavy place. I used to hang out there, Heavy place. Westchester Library in LA. Heavy place. These were places where I could be left alone. The UTEP Library. The University of Texas at El Paso. Place that means so much to me, where I got my graduate degree. Sometimes I'd ask, is there anywhere else you would have rather gone? Anywhere else you'd rather be? Hell no. Hell no. I love El Paso. I love UTEP. And that's where, where I got to study with the greats. and I got to, on this path that still goes. So thanks for asking me to this conference. Stay strong during the pandemic. I hope all of you find uh, what you're searching for, and don't let anybody stop you. You know, Yet there's so many opportunities here. If you dig education, take it all the way. If you dig writing, take it all the way. Don't let anybody stop you. Don't let you become yourself. And you take the licks and you take the successes and just be you. Just be you. And realize that you've got a lot of blessings and struggles too ahead of you. But what a great life it is. And I want to thank everybody who has helped me along the way. And I'm here to help anyone else. If you ever need to reach me, you can hit me up, lawrencewelsh@hotmail.com, or I'll be back in fall at the community college. You can reach me there. And with that said, I hope you all have a great summer. Thanks for inviting me to this conference. And once again, I want to thank Gloria and Maritza for bringing me in. I'll leave you as the Irish always leave people, or they do in Ireland. In the times I've been there, they tell you, good luck, good luck, good luck, good luck, good luck. I'm wishing you the best of luck, and I hope you have a great summer. Thank you.